Hey guys, I'm Kevin Brennan. I'm in New York City. I'm here at a Passive House project on site. I'm excited to bring to you a construction tech this week, Passive House Live Edition, cracking the case by thinking thermally. I follow Rob on all the social media pages and see all his great images and the conversation he creates by throwing out thermal images and trying to figure out what kind of heat loss ghosts are happening in those walls. And I'm pleasure to meet Biz the other day, and I'm excited to see her presentation about what's going on in her work. But one of the great parts of construction tech is bringing the technology. And early in my career, I fell in love with thermal imaging. I once lent my thermal imaging camera to a fine, smart gentleman, and he created an image that made it around the world through TED Talks, through other images, has inspired other people to build Passive House. So I am here. I'm going to kick it off to my other co-hosts. Hopefully, these images will inspire other people to get more into thermal imaging and to crack the code on other thermal imaging problems. And from this fast break to thermal breaks, I kick it off to you guys.
Perfect, Kevin. I think we're still waiting for Sean Sadamore, so I'm just going to jump in. Hello, old and new Passive House friends. I'm Shannon Pendleton, and I lead Passive House projects at Sanderson Sustainable and Source 2050. I'm zooming in from New Hope with the construction tech crew for our thermal imaging presentation with Rob Hosken and Biz Sanfelippo today. So things are heating up. To that end, please share the work you're doing to make our buildings more excellent and efficient, and help the accelerator go global by moving the local needle where you are. So think like Bev Craig from Mass Save, she's here. And check out the link I'm going to throw in the chat for more info on how you can do more right in your own backyard. So with that, I'm going to throw it over to Mark.
All right. Before you do that, maybe I could just say hello.
Oh,
So
you're here.
just want to say hello. This is not an MTV episode. You're not back in the 80s. This is live with a thermal imaging camera. And big shout out to the team here to present on this lovely piece of equipment and how we can use it to detect a whole bunch of amazing things in our buildings. So good morning, everybody. I'm Sean Sadamore, and I've got a thermal imaging camera to help me improve and look at buildings. So over to you, Mark.
All right. So we've heard from Kim, we've heard from Zach, we've heard from Kevin, we've heard from Shannon, we've heard from Sean. Congratulations, by the way. And today, we're blessed to hear from both Biz and Rob. I'm thrilled for this thermal conversation. Just a friendly reminder, when you have questions, and we hope you have a lot of them, just put a Q at the bottom. So my name is Mark Willey. I'm thrilled at this topic here on Construction Tech. And let me introduce our presenters. Elizabeth Sanfelippo, AKA Biz, right? She's a building scientist and a HERS rater based out of Birmingham, Alabama. She is a senior engineering associate at BRAYN Consulting, working on 45L and Energy Star and Zero Energy Ready Homes. She is actively involved in her city's neighborhood association, which is awesome, the National Association of Women in Construction, Birmingham Women Leaders, and ResNet Emerging Leadership Council. When she is not working on her house project, she enjoys watching first responder dramas with her husband, 2 rescue dogs, and the adopted cat. Welcome, Biz. And now, a familiar face is our good friend, Rob Hosken. So, what are the many things about Rob? Well, he grew up in Wisconsin, so that makes him awesome right away. And he grew up in a passive solar home. It costs nothing to heat on a sunny day in the winter of Wisconsin. So that's from his youth, right? And then in architect school, Rob received the Green Building Scholarship from Senator Gaylord Nelson, the founder of Earth Day. Rob now promotes the new green paradigm via his professional and, of course, his awesome personal activities. As principal of building performance architecture Rob has helped deliver the first Passive House certified library in the US, and I might add it's the most quiet one, the only Energy Star multifamily high-rise certified apartment building in Western Pennsylvania, and many other high-performance buildings. Rob collaborates with building teams to reduce building energy use and increase building quality through expert hands-on QA, QC. Please welcome Rob and Biz.
Thank you. Okay, great. Today we are talking about cracking the case by thinking thermally. I'll be advancing the slides, so please bear with me because I am plagued by tech issues. Today's outline, oops, let me see here. There we go. So we're going to do a little intro with some general concepts. Then I'm going to talk a little bit about my amateur use of infrared on existing homes. Rob is going to talk about other diagnostics and high performance projects. And then we'll wrap up with the conclusion and questions and answers. So with infrared, we reveal building science phenomena and enhance communication. Rob has, on this post, over 16,000 impressions. He's become quite the celebrity in terms of thermal imaging. And one thing that I particularly love coming from an art background is that thermal imaging brings this visual beauty to science when we generally tend to put those things in separate categories. Let's see. So 7 out of the 10 passive house design principles, the ones in red text, involve thermal phenomena that do not involve using energy to create or remove heat. We need an effective thermal detector and communicator to confirm we're optimizing subtle thermal phenomena in our building projects. And for building science applications, infrared cameras show things like air leakage, insulation defects, thermal bridging, moisture on surfaces, moisture below roofs, failed glazing seals, HVAC problems, and electrical problems, as well as pests. The image on the left shows a good bit of air leakage, as well as missing insulation. And the image on the right shows thermal bridging, where the brick support angles are coming through the wall. So let's talk a little bit about what infrared cameras do and don't do. The camera images show only intensity with a certain spectral range of 7 to 14 micrometers. And the infrared camera images only show surface temperature, sometimes air temperature. The thermograms do not use different colors to represent different wavelengths or infrared radiation. The different colors in the thermograms represent different intensity of radiation within a certain spectral range. They don't see through objects. The only see-through effect is when something behind an object heats or cools the object's surface that the camera sees. So the apparent temperature that they show is the reflected radiation plus transmitted radiation plus emitted radiation to get the total radiation detected from the object. The photos on the right show a round metal duct in a wooden bulkhead. There's no exhaust fan or damper attached yet, and they forgot to tape the indoor opening of the duct before they turned the blower door on. Oops. The blower door fan is sucking cold air into the house through this exhaust duct. So which part of the duct is the lowest temperature? It's kind of a trick question. The whole duct is the same temperature, but the metal part looks warmer than the taped joint because the metal is reflecting the warmth from the indoor surfaces much more than the tape is. The metal has a higher reflectance and lower emissivity than the tape. If hot air were moving through the duct, the tape would look warmer than the metal in the thermogram. Take it away, Rob.
Yeah, so I think we took care of some technical stuff, and we have to cover. Well, we did a little technology too. Technique is coming. So I wanted to talk about how infrared works well as a communication tool. And you guys have heard of the famous children's book, Frog and Toad Are Friends. I think that thermography and neuroscience are actually friends too. Because I think infrared photography, infrared images work well with the way that people's brains process information. And I don't necessarily want to call it how we think, because there is a lot more feeling, I think, that goes on in people's brains than there is necessarily like deliberative thinking. And that's something that's covered in these two books on the slide here. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning economist, did research into decision science, and he wrote this book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So he talks about how there's two different systems in people's brains about how they process information. One is really quick reactions, and the other is slower, more deliberative. But you have to, I'll go through this a little bit more. You have to hit the quick reaction before you can get to the deliberative process. And then Zoe Chance is a professor at Yale, and she wrote this great book that kind of translates some of Kahneman's research into sort of more practical ways to communicate with people. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit more in depth about how people's brains process information. And I feel I'm pretty lucky to be able to talk about this stuff, and I'm not talking about buildings right now. Isn't that weird? So the two systems of processing information in people's brains, there's the gator, which is the quick thinking, quick reactions, and it's associated with the lower parts of the brain there in the diagram. Gators will actually pass out if you tip them upside down because their brain rattles around in their skull. And then there's the judge, which is in the upper part of the brain that evolved more recently, and humans evolved that, and it's taken us where we all are today. We're communicating without being in the same room and all that stuff. So the long and short is that the gator can act without input from the judge, but the judge can't act without input from the gator. And in order to influence somebody, you have to get the attention of their gator brain. And I wanted to give you a little bit of warning. I forgot. There's a little bit of a surprise coming. We'll do 2 seconds on this slide, and then we'll go to the next slide. Okay. All right. So did you guys all see that? What just happened there? So that was a little just an image to demonstrate that your brain will process information really fast. The brain reacts to danger signals very quickly. But it also has the gator brain has the capability of responding to more than just danger. Anything visually striking can work, and that's where I think infrared images sometimes work. Go to the next slide. So this one is a little bit nicer to look at, more fun to look at than a scary gorilla costume. Not too much scary happening in this infrared image, but it's really visually striking, and I think that's where you get your foot in the door with being able to communicate building science concepts with infrared images. Next slide. So one of the things that I like to say that my company does is make energy efficiency visible and tangible, and infrared is one of the ways to do that. But I think like being able to communicate building science concepts in a way that people like the general public can understand it's really great to be able to do that. I'm glad to have the tools. So what happens when we show infrared images is that it grabs your attention, it gets that gator brain paying attention. Then you realize it's a thermal image. Every pixel of the image actually represents a data point, and your higher faculties, your judge part of your brain starts to ramp up. So you start to look closer and say this image on the right, you try to see what's there, what's going on with that building. There's a lot happening. I might tell you that it's a concrete structure, and you can see the posts and beams, kind of heating up the exterior wall. There's also some pretty bad thermal breaches happening on that upper part of the wall. So you start to name things that are happening, understand things. You can reach some conclusions, and then once you've understood it, got some more reactions going on in your brain about, okay, yeah, I get it. This makes sense, or oh, I didn't know that was happening. But so this is just talking about how infrared images can help people see and feel building science in a direct way. And so it might be one of the ways. It's not the only way. I focus on it, but I realize there's lots of ways to inspire marketplace adoption of Passive House and energy efficiency. Passive House Accelerator is doing a really great job at that. And there was a conversation that Mark Willie and I had one day in Chicago, and we can go to the next slide. We were talking about that subject. Mark said, one of the ways we could do that, speaking of basketball, what if LeBron James would build a passive house? Wouldn't that be great? Everybody everybody identifies with sports heroes. So that would be one of the ways we could do that. And then Graham Irwin is actually here, and so I want to mention his Passive House conference talk, where he did a great presentation about how he reaches people, and he potential clients. He does not talk about the technical aspects of Passive House when he talks to clients. I think they kind of have to pry it out of him if they want to know. But he talks about how they're going to feel when they get that high quality building, and how their lives are going to change. Having connections to outdoors and things like that. So that was a really good presentation. I think everybody should listen to that to hear more about communicating Passive House. And then next is speaking of connections to outdoors, this image on the right here being part of the presentation that Zach Semke did on Solarpunk. And Solarpunk kind of envisions a future where people have kind of solved the problems of ecological destruction, and have made all of their systems work towards sustaining the environment. And that image is from actually a yogurt ad. Isn't that weird? Chobani company decided to go Solarpunk. Next slide. So I already did the first bullet point there. So the connection between infrared imaging and Solarpunk, for me, there's a lot. It's a fairly easy tool to use once you, anybody can take infrared photos. And I think the issue comes in with, you know, being able to interpret the images correctly. So that takes a little bit of training, but it's not really hard. So, you know, and the punk movement in general, there's a picture of Zach Semke in the 1980s on the left there, at a punk show. No, that's actually not Zach, sorry. So the punk movement in general, you know, some of the values are authenticity, simplicity, you know, doing things yourself, liberation from kind of the authority systems that are, you know, that are kind of trying to control things. So, and the interest in infrared images also is, I think it's always in the contrast between in different thermal signatures. So that's something pretty apparent with punk too. I think there's some contrast between those two guys, the guy with the mohawk and then the guy behind him with the police hat on there. So the contrast with infrared images, you know, it's great to show a passive building and show how nice it is. You know, thermally, there's actually going to be not so much variation within the building itself, but I actually found, you know, it's not that exciting to take a photo, an infrared photo of a passive building like out in a field by itself, because there's not a lot of contrast. Like, you know, it's good, but when you take a picture like this of the 6 in Cane project that Norm Horn managed, he's here today, that shows the contrast between the passive building and the non-passive buildings next to it. You know, that is really striking. So that's where the interest comes in, infrared and passive buildings. I think I'm done with communication. It's your turn.
All right. So I'm clearly all about energy efficiency, even if it's making observations in my, what some would call less than efficient home that was built in the 1920s. I like to think it has its own unique efficiency about it. It has a relatively new gas boiler that runs the original radiator system, which is great, works very well. And our mass walls help to maintain comfortable interior temperatures. But I noticed this year during spring shoulder season that I could hear that the heat pump AC system upstairs was running. And then I thought I heard some clanking and hissing, which if you've been around radiators, you know, they make those awesome noises. And so I went downstairs and used my hand to feel that the radiators were indeed running. And then I confirmed it with the thermal camera. I then quickly ran before telling my husband that both of our systems were running at the same time and adjusted the temperatures on all 3 of our thermostats. So it's definitely a system that's been cobbled together and works well when they're not trying to work against each other. And then this slide shows a wall with a pipe that had leaked up in the ceiling above. And we finally got it repaired, got the ceiling put back together. My plumber, I asked him how it was going when he was taking out part of the old pipe, and he said, "It's violent." And I had never heard a plumber use the term violent, but apparently the way it was built back in the day was just very well done and very hard to get out. So we are planning to install some shelves with brackets back on the wall. Obviously, we don't want to hit the pipe that's in there. So I ran hot water through it and shot this image and then put the tape on the wall around where we didn't want to drill. And I had a much better image, but I forgot to click the save button on the camera, which is one thing that I don't love about this camera. which is the FLIR TG167. I'm not sure that they make it anymore. I think it was about $250 a few years ago. And I actually tried to return it because the screen, it's about 1.25 inches by 1.5 inches, which sounded fine, but I didn't realize it wasn't quite what I was looking for in terms of size and contrast. And I'm not fond of the fact that you have to remember to save each image after you capture it. I've lost some great images because of that, unfortunately. And for the slide I'll show in a minute, I used this old school FLIR X-Tech i5. And I want to say it cost around $2,000 or $2,500, probably 14 or so years ago. This is what I used at my old job that I liked, and I couldn't find it online when I was trying to put together images for this presentation. So I tried searching for old orange and green FLIR camera, vintage FLIR, but no luck. So texted my old coworker, he still uses the same one, and he sent me the model information and these pictures. And guess what? I found one on eBay for $170 that's coming this week. So I'm very excited. Again, I'm much more of the amateur thermal imaging group, and so I don't need one that's necessarily going to produce super high intense images. It's more of a little bit of a hobby and illustrator for me. So with that camera, I took these two images, which we used. The one on the left is the old attic ventilation fan, and the one on the right is a can light. And obviously these were taken on very warm days, and so you can see the contrast much better. This was while a blower door was running, and at my old company we did energy evaluations and retrofits. So we would use images like this to illustrate to homeowners, what are you talking about when you're talking about air sealing? I don't think my house needs that, et cetera, et cetera. So with that, I will turn it back over to you, Rob.
Cool. Yeah, sorry if my sound's not coming through. So I'll just try to talk louder. I don't know that there's much I'll be able to do with my setup right now. But anyway, going to thermography and high performance building projects, getting into technique. So a couple of different project types here. The one on the left is the roof only of the living building project. You see all the solar panels, and it's got a super great insulated roof hatch. But the deal with the living building challenge is that the buildings are required to generate all of the energy that they use on site. I think with some provision for taking from the grid and giving back to the grid. So the challenge there is you have to make the building energy efficient, because you don't want to go above the amount of renewable energy that you can generate on site. And obviously passive house on the right. This was a blower door test of a 58 unit apartment building, passive certified now. The first final test, the infrared camera picked up the fact that the heat pump line set penetrations through the walls had not been sealed, and it wasn't pretty. So that was a good thing to be able to pick that up, and we were able to do a second test that passed with flying colors on the final. Next slide. So this is the camera that I use. It's a FLIR E95. There are several manufacturers and formats of cameras. Some are for different applications, but this is a good one for building inspections. You see the resolution 464 by 348. That's pretty good. If anybody wants to contribute to my GoFundMe for my next level camera, that'd be great. But this one's pretty good for now. The things that I like about this one are the fact that it takes visible light images and IR images at the same time, and it has file names for those that are right next to each other, so you don't have to go and sort through your files after you take it. There's autofocus and manual focus. Manual is great when the autofocus doesn't quite do it for you. The laser pointer is great, and the laser also measures the distance to your subject, and it also enables the camera to do calculations of surface areas if you need to. I actually haven't used that, but then FLIR has this MSX technology, which I think it's pretty cool, but I don't tend to use. What I do use all the time is their Ultramax resolution enhancement, which actually takes several IR images at one click of the trigger, and then the software can blend the images, or what do you call it, like weave the images together, and it gets it to a higher resolution. And then there's color palettes, which we'll go into in more depth in a little bit. All right, next slide. All right, so more on technique. So when you're taking images in the field, there's some things that you can only do when you're taking the images, and you can't do with software in the office. And the way to remember it, the way I remember it, is my grandpa's truck. Ford, it's a Ford. It stands for focus. You have to focus your image in the field. The R is range of temperature settings. So the camera has different ranges that it can look at. So you have to have it set in the right range. That's pretty much a given. And yeah, focus could be spelled with a PH. I don't know if Ford can be or not, but then the D is distance and field of view. So you want to be at a distance where you can see the scene that you want to see. There we go. Yeah, there's a Ford focus. And then if you do all those things, with a camera that has good resolution, you can get images like the one on the right there, which is looking up at the top of a 6-story building from ground level, and definitely see that there's something going on at that roof overhang. Okay, next slide. And so now I'm just going to go through my process, and this is the last part of the presentation. So I pretty much always just automatically do this this Ultramax resolution enhancement and left versus right. It actually doesn't do a whole lot, but you can see that the image on the right is a little bit sharper and clearer than the one on the left. So that's what the Ultramax does. Next slide. Then I'm going to talk about color palettes and where I start and where I finish to get to an image that I think communicates what I'm trying to communicate in ways that people get. So this one, the resolutions are already enhanced. All other settings are at default settings. It's the iron bow palette. The temperature span on the image is what the camera did automatically in the field. And if the sky is shown as the bottom of the range, is always going to be -40 degrees. So I usually end up adjusting that to get more of the range and more of the colors within the subject area that I'm looking at. So that'll show up in the next slide. So here I've adjusted the bottom of the temperature span to 0 instead of -40, so we get more colors within the subject. Yeah, it's Fahrenheit degrees, being based in the U.S. Someday we'll all switch over to Celsius, but today I'm in Fahrenheit. So then I've adjusted the temperature span, and then I'm going to start looking at different color palettes. I basically just try to settle on the one that shows what I want to show the best. You can see basically the subject in this image is a coffee shop that the designers thought it would be great to be able to open up the front of it. So they put a overhead door in the front facade of the coffee shop. And those are pretty notorious in my experience for not being great thermally. So next slide, please. So this is a grayscale temperature palette. Some people who are really into, trying to get accurate temperature readings and accurate interpretations say this is the only palette you should ever use. I'm more of a qualitative kind of investigator and communicator. So I don't always use this. Sometimes though, it's good. I think it looks a little bit X-Files in a way. All right, next. This is the lava color palette, which is a little bit more vivid than the iron bow. Go to the next one. The Arctic color palette. That's the same palette that was on the cover slide. So sometimes that's very effective. There's kind of a sharp break between the warmer areas and the colder areas with the gold versus the blue. Next. Then getting into rainbow. Sometimes this is really good. I think the rainbow palette's really good for surfaces that are more like 2D, where you want to see different temperatures pretty vividly. And then the next one is rainbow high contrast, which kind of brings out the sort of the 3D aspect of it. It sort of kind of pops the dimensions out. So in this one, this is where I end up a lot of times, just because I think it really brings out contrast a lot. It helps show what's going on. So this one is using what's called a histogram equalization color distribution, where the temperatures that are most common in the image, the spectrum of the color span is compressed around the most common colors, so you get a lot of variation in the colors that are shown. And if we go to the next one, change it to a linear distribution of colors. So it's temperature linear color distribution, and you see that it's the same temperature span, but a lot of those different colors went away because the most common temperatures are in that blue-green range. And it also tends to be a little bit more clear, a little bit less dramatic, so that you're not kind of being blown away by that high contrast. But I also do like to get more of a range of colors in the image. So then I'll go back and readjust the temperatures again, which you'll see in the next slide. So this is the final adjustment where I brought the bottom temperature up to 15 degrees Fahrenheit and the top down a little bit. So we get the kind of the full range of the color palette, and you get all of the details. You can see the two hot spots at the head of the overhead door there. You can see that the front door of the business is actually a single pane glass door, whereas the rest of the glass is double pane. And the first versus the last image. So, see where we started and where we ended up. And that's all I have.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much. Rob and I would like to thank the kind folks at Passive House Accelerator for inviting us to speak and for hosting. And I'd like to personally thank Rob for including me and providing the opportunity to meet some of the Passive House Accelerators and to present today. I've already learned a ton from him, and he's not only super smart, he's a really nice guy. So thank y'all.
Thank you, Biz.
Well, Biz, the thanks goes to you and to Rob. Each image that you guys gave, it delivers us, to me, a sixth sense, right? The way it conveys it forward. I invite everyone to contact them directly on the what's in front of you, as well as Shannon and Kim have put on links to their media pages, because they're constantly sharing their skills in the marketplace and on media. I'm delighted by those images and how you also employ this in your personal spaces to figure things out. That's really what it's about. We don't give up our professionalism when we go home, and sometimes we work from our homes. So all these environments benefit from a thermal image. We have many people that joined today, and special thanks to our sponsors for making all of this possible.
Hi, I'd like to give a big thank you to the fine organizations that make our work at Passive House Accelerator possible. First, a big shout out to our stakeholder partner, NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. Thank you too to our founding sponsors, 475 High Performance Building Supply, Baxt Ingwe Architects, Glavel, Minutair, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, Rockwell North America, Stocorp, and Zola Windows. And thank you to our champion sponsors, Bewiso, Icon Windows and Doors, Intelligent Membranes, Proseco, and Source 2050. And thank you to our patron sponsors, Brennan, Coltraco Ultrasonics, Euroline Windows, Holstrom System, Inotech Windows and Doors, Lamelux, Owens Corning, RDH Building Science, Sanderson Sustainable Design, and US Engineered Wood T-Stud. Thank you, sponsors.
Fantastic, Rob, Biz. Really great presentation. We appreciate the time you've taken today to bring the technical, the technique, and the technology. And I've thrown my own question in the chat. Can you give us an hourly rate for tutoring those of us who went out and bought a thermal imaging camera, but we're noobs? We don't know what we're doing. We need help finding these settings and creating amazing images like the ones you shared with us today. I really loved the emphasis on the ability to communicate quickly with these images. I've always felt that way too, and you gave it a great show today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shannon. Yeah, that gets me thinking. I don't have an answer for you. I could say it's free with a PH.
Rob, my question is, did you take any formal training, any level certified thermographer courses, level 1, level 2, anything like that?
Yeah, I had level 1 in 2011 and level 2 after I bought my current camera in 2017.
Yeah, there are great trainings available through, both the national organizations that travel the country that do the training. So anyone looking for that training, it's available. The level 1 is a great training, and it's awareness, kind of like intro to the cameras. The level 2 is a little more advanced. But I took the level 2 a bunch of years ago, and I haven't maintained my certification because it didn't really differentiate me as a contractor. But you, Rob, as a thermographer, it definitely sets the tone and makes you a professional in the room. So, but it obviously tells by your work and great images. So.
Thanks. Yeah, most of the people in my level 2 course were Navy submarine operators, where they have to use thermal cameras to make sure their sub is functioning properly and everybody stays alive.
Yeah, it makes finding air leaks a lot less important.
Yeah.
Rob, if you have the ability, can you share a link to the training outfit that you used in the chat for
Sure.
those who might be interested? I think a lot of folks
Yeah.
would love to know that resource. And
Okay.
Sean, do you want to kick us off with our first question?
Yeah, Rob and Biz, again, you guys have taken many photos over the years. Do you guys have a favorite? I'll show you one of mine. Well, let me, again, it's funny when you get inspired about some of this stuff. So let me just turn the background off. Sorry, so you guys can see this. So again, might remember this. This is the Icebox Challenge from Vancouver. And this was one of the photos we got done. So again, you can see the big block of ice and then the, heated gentleman. Do you guys have a favorite that you've gathered over the years that kind of brings you back to your roots and kind of what got you into it? Or is it now just a blur of images?
Probably one of the images that I showed of the can light, just because it's so vibrant, it's so simple, but so many builders that I've worked with just don't get, well, it's an iCat. It says it's airtight. Well, it's not if you don't install it properly. So I think that's probably one of my favorites. Another funny one is I have a little adopted Chihuahua. She has 3 legs and her name is Easel. And she went out to go to the bathroom one night, and she had gone in an area where she doesn't normally go and where people generally walk. And so I wanted to find it, could not find it. So I whipped out the thermal camera and was able to find that little prize that she had left for me. So that was just another little funny time that I've used the camera in a weird way.
I'm trying to open one up right now.
Well, and while you're doing that, Rob, I
Yeah.
have to shout out to you, Biz, because your life hack for finding the plumbing in the wall is killer. And I think that is the biggest takeaway for me right now, because it was beyond the scope of my imagination to think that way. But now I won't ever forget that. And I'm going to use that all the time, because I'm always renovating and hanging things and wondering, am I going to hit something in the walls? I know how to find the stud, know how to find the electric, but I'd forgotten how to find the plumbing. So thank you.
Awesome.
There's my share. You guys see that?
Oh, that's fantastic.
There you go.
That was not one that I took. That was one that Sean took in Chicago. So what are we, Charlie's
That was,
Angels?
what would you call that? The morning after FiesCon.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're looking very colorful.
Well, we were all pretty blue, right? Because the convention was over and we didn't get to hang out with our buddy Kevin Brennan. So we were all quite blue that day.
Yeah. And again, you look at the Graham mentioned it about my hair. Well, again, the beard, insulating factor.
Yeah.
Well, we've got a question in the chat here from Ben Station. Ben, it looks like you're still with us. Would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yeah, actually, I kind of feel on the spot right now because I don't remember what it was. I think it was just about where to find the slides and if we were able to use them outside of the group. I think it was slide 5 right at the beginning had, and I believe that's the potlight image you were just discussing, and the list of associated issues that you could find with the thermography.
It's a great question, Ben, and usually just a few days with the PH after every presentation, whether you're on Construction 101 or Showcase, any of the Passive House Accelerator lives, they're grouped both on the website and on YouTube. And we encourage you not only to watch them again, but take the screen images and share it to social media and just keep delivering it. I follow your photographs all the time, Ben, and whenever you could share these from the accelerator, we appreciate it, brother.
No, absolutely. I think that slide in particular would be really useful in communicating with clients. So glad to hear that I can take that guilt-free. Thank you.
Perfect. We also have a question from Eric. Eric, would you like to unmute and ask your question? If you're not still with us, I can read it for you. It's for Biz. Eric says, with respect to your 10-year-old FLIR X-Tech, how well would a recent vintage FLIR work mounted on a smartphone? How would that compare with the vintage ones and the new ones? And I'm interested in the answer to that too, because that's the unit that I have. Have you used one that goes onto a smartphone yet? And do you see any limitations there?
I have not, other than with my tech issues. My smartphone tends to like to die when I'm out in the field trying to take pictures. And so I guess that's just another thing that I like about the old school one, is that, you know, it's not remotely charging. It's not, I plug it in and I know that works. So like right now I have an old school mouse that's wired to my computer, and I've got all sorts of other wires. I don't really like wireless things. And so I guess I'm just partial to the old school, but I haven't compared them side by side. That's a good question.
Well, and they don't fall victim to if the change of the phone and its port alter, suddenly now you have a FLIR that is even more dated because you can't plug it into your new phone. So yeah, good points. All right, up next we have Chris Spichelski. Chris, do you have a question for us? Are you still with us?
Yeah, I'm here. Actually, two, if I could ask. The photo, the living building challenge on the left and on the right, you found the refrigerant lines. I was wondering if you just had luck, or is it, you know, you take the camera to every penetration? But the question I asked in the chat was, I install foam, and it's an exothermic reaction. So if you can see the image of a wall behind me, it takes maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And on a recent job, it took over 20 minutes. Like it felt forever. And I thought something wrong had happened. I checked outside, but then eventually, just because of the whatever weird plaster it was, it just started showing up very slowly. So I'm wondering if there's any advice on settings, or is it I just have to wait?
So yeah, I could feel that. Somebody else is going to say something.
I was just going to help if you need any, Rob, but you got it.
Well, I could talk to Kevin. I'll let you talk about the second part. I'll just say with the first question about the refrigerant lines. I just made sure to walk through the whole building with the camera while the blower door was running. And some people on my team get a little bit impatient with me while I do that. But that's how I found it. Yeah. You wanna field the second one, Kevin?
Yeah, so it looks like you're doing pour-in-place foam behind plaster and lath. And what I find when I've insulated walls with, say, cellulose, trying to use the thermal imaging camera as quality control, the thermal mass of the actual plaster is greater than the other side. So the heat flow will go from towards the weak side, which would be outside. So it won't show on the inside. That's why thermal imaging is really tough to use as a teaching tool, is because there's a lot at play. You know, like there's a reason why they use it to find ghosts, because what you expect to happen a lot of times doesn't really happen. And sometimes you'll see mysterious things, but it's a great tool. And to know that there are other contractors out there using thermal imaging to confirm that their work is being in place, it's great. I threw in a link in the chat of one of my projects where I'm blowing cellulose and trying to make sure that we hit every cavity in every bay. And you can see that as we're blowing the cellulose in the wall, the friction of the cellulose going through the hose actually creates some sort of heat reaction in the wall. And you can see the warm ones as opposed to the cold ones. And it's a great tool, and you know, it's there. But if you're putting foam behind plaster, it does take time for the thermal mass of the plaster to really like heat up to show. Even though you are getting the foam up, you know, the foam in the wall might be 100, maybe 112 degrees or so. But I hope that answered your question to my knowledge.
Sean, you had a couple in here. Did you want to jump in and ask a question?
Yep, I'll just say a quick goodbye to those that have to sneak off to enjoy their day. Well, we've got the final 15 where we will dive into the last bit of questions. So thanks for sharing your favorite cameras. Do you recommend any for phone-based IR camera models? I think that was kind of Shannon, your question, but yeah, how does it work worthwhile between, you know, again, we're all mobile these days and it's nice to just be able to put on an adapter. Have you guys looked at any for yourselves? And if not, I know there's some questions kind of price point wise that people would be interested in. So let us know your thoughts on either the big tools or the adaptable ones.
What do you think, Biz?
I tend to be at the low end of the budget. I saw some cameras that were like $47,000 when I was looking for my old school FLIR. I wouldn't feel comfortable handling a piece of equipment like that. Not sure about anyone else, but again, I'm gonna stick with the lower end. And I think you can do a lot with ones that are under $300. Still very excited for my $170 old school one to come. So
Hey, Biz, does the $47,000 one come with a 4-wheel drive pickup truck?
and a college education and
Right.
a butler. Yeah. I have no idea. It was mind-boggling.
Biz, I personally, sorry,
Go ahead.
Mark.
Go ahead.
I personally bought my camera on eBay as well. So I think there's a great secondary market for cameras as well. I set the alerts on my eBay to know when FLIR cameras are coming up. You get great deals out there. It's like buying a used car. Like why buy the value up front? But there are some great deals out there. But resolution wise, you want to have enough resolution to really kind of, you know, capture some great images, you know, to expand, to use the tools like Rob's using. But you know, qualitatively, it's a tool that anyone can use, you know, anything from the little handheld guy. Mark, what do you have there?
Yeah, so I have the Stephen Basic Architect Special Edition HIK Micro. This fits in my pocket, and wherever I go, I get a little Big Red with me to help me out. So it's amazing. I don't know if anyone else has this, but it's really handy. It's the size of my phone, and actually it's smaller, which is crazy. But yeah, HIK Micro. I also have the handheld one, but it's super handy. It plugs right into the computer. Just ask for the Stephen Basic Big Red Edition.
Perfect. I love it. We've got a couple questions from those in the chat. Carolyn Porret, I would love to know what the Office of Recapitalization at HUD does before you ask your question, if you're able to unmute and join us.
Good afternoon.
Hi, Carolyn.
This is my first time attending. I had no idea it was so much fun and live and interactive. We're looking at several different green certifications, including living, building, and FIAS. We do multifamily retrofits. Anyhow, so the reason I was asking about the images and whether there's a standard is if across the various certifications, if there's something that's expected in imaging, it'd be great for me to know.
I could jump on that one. There is no specific standard, but if you go through the FIAS verifier standard training, I do believe that there's a heavy section on thermal imaging and how you use the thermal imaging for verification on the FIAS standard. But there is no specific like actual standard which certification to use or which training to use. It's pretty much just suggesting to use the tool within a professional parameter. And then on the PHI side, there is no standard on how to use it. But it's like everything in life. You want to come up with your hypothesis using a smart tool, and then confirm it with another source, either manual temperature or open things up and find where the problems are. It's kind of how I use it.
Thank you.
Thanks for your question. And next we have Margaret Reynolds. I see your hand up there. Hi, Margaret. Welcome.
I just wanted to say that I'm in Cambridge, England, and we have been doing thermal imaging camera training for the past 6 or 8 years here. And this past year was a real bumper year because we had 400 people that went through the thermal imaging training, which you have to do first. And then we run 9 cameras that belong to us and to the city and to the county. And we have volunteer hosts who lend these things out either over the weekend or during the week between October and April. And it's been fantastically successful. People do it mostly because they're fixing up their house and they want to do something and check it, or else they want to start. But it seems to be at least as interesting to people to do that, particularly because you can borrow a, $1,000 camera for free. In fact, we had somebody who ran over their camera with their car, and we were able to get it completely replaced on the insurance. So we're expecting the same again next year. Just thought that was an interesting idea, but of course, there's 200,000 people within very quick distance here, so it wouldn't work so well in other areas, but it works brilliantly here.
That's great, Margaret. Thank you very much for sharing. Anyone in California, I know the utilities in California have lending libraries, PG&E. They lend out really smart tools. And then I've always been trying to encourage our local Passive House chapters to open up and to be small little lending libraries of infrared camera, blower doors, things that not every practitioner up and coming is going to have access to, but it's great added value. Even Sam borrowed the camera too. Smart people with smart tools get really great results.
I will say the one time that I lent this out, an architect called me and she said, we looked at her house at Eco3 for some comfort issues. And she said, I think you may still have a thermal camera. This is going to sound really weird, but my nephew is doing some renovations and they can't find their cat. And I think that the cat may have gotten into the open walls. And we were just wondering if we could borrow your thermal camera. I said, no problem. She brought it back a couple days later and she had this horrified look on her face. And she said, Elizabeth, I'm so sorry. I think it got dropped. The faceplate came off of it. And I said, no big deal. I tried to return it and they couldn't because it had a lithium battery and freight. And finally, the company I bought it from just said, just keep it and we'll refund your money. So no skin off my back, and it still works. So just thought I'd share that. The one time I lent it out and they didn't find the cat. They ended up getting another cat because they thought that one had taken off and gotten hit by a car or something. And then a couple of weeks later, the cat came back. So now they have 2.
You have the best IR stories ever, Biz. I love it. Perfect. Our next question up is from Mike Lind, and then we'll move. Mike asked, who makes a camera in the hundreds instead of the thousands that can give images close to the E96? Did we cover that one already? I wasn't quite sure. Yeah, you think so? Okay, well, then let's invite Eric back. Eric, would you like to unmute? And
Hi, I found my button this time. Okay. Yeah, low E coatings. Do they change the way things look from outside when you're looking at window assemblies? Any comments on that?
Yeah, they do. We've seen a few instances where a glazing unit was put in backwards and you get one glazing panel that is a different temperature than all the rest of them. And that's kind of the giveaway. I recently saw one posted on LinkedIn where someone caught that in the thermal image that somebody else had posted. So yeah.
Eric, you had a
Hey,
second
Rob, while
question.
you're
Did you want to
answering-
follow up?
Go ahead.
I did. I forgot what it was.
It's how did we cover how moisture leaks
Oh,
or
right. Yes.
condensation show up in thermal images? Any comments?
Yeah, because I know that some investigators use thermal cameras to find leaks in membrane roofs, but I suppose anybody using a thermal camera is bound to run into moisture. So any comments?
We have photos of all kinds of different things, and there just wasn't enough time to show them all today. So yeah, there, we could do more. Different presentations will show different things. There's another presentation coming up where we are going to do that. Maybe sometime on Passive House Accelerator we can get into that. So.
Well, thanks so much for asking that question, Eric. Mark, you had a comment. You want to take us into the home stretch?
Yeah, so I've seen great photos. Eric, I don't exactly know what you do professionally in this world of construction and passive house, but I've seen great photos, not just of the differential of the plumbing that's going on, and often indicating the lack of insulation on our pipes, right? So it's a big indicator of the loss. But wonderful photos of our electrical panels and those hot spots in there that no one has caught. So simply wandering over to that panel and taking a picture might be enlightened that something is way off. So many of us are enthused with the envelope and the leakage, but the plumbers and electricians use this quite a bit. So don't underthink it. Always overthink it and allow that sixth sense to come. But I wanted, Bob, if you can elaborate, when you're taking those early morning walks and exploring these buildings, is there a delta from, let's say, our 70-degree indoor spaces to the exterior space that helps people best capture what that facade is doing?
Yeah, so I think it might even be in the Passive House standard too, where there's a recommendation to have 18-degree minimum temperature delta between indoors and outdoors. And when I go on my walks, I usually like to do it when it's, around freezing or below freezing temperature, just because it gets a lot easier to see things. So, yeah. I
guess I'll follow with that because Kevin had such a cool comment on cellulose. Kevin, if a cavity is sealed on the interior, it's like a membrane, and you're popping that cellulose into it, is there a really cool change that happens from the bare wall, and then as you expand down that wall, how that cellulose activates that image? Have you seen that, Kevin, or did you have to leave us for a duty? I think he had to leave us for a duty. So Rob, have you seen that insulation been present during the install, so you can kind of get like that interesting fade pattern ramping?
Yeah, I haven't actually looked at it during the install like that, no. But we have seen cellulose that has settled, over time, and then they came back and repacked and stuff. So
that's a patented test and verify, right?
Yep.
Well, Rob,
so that's a challenge to everyone out there, I guess. If your projects or installers are involved in an insulation process, try to capture that and share it, tag Passive House Accelerator, because these images always excite us, and we're gonna give you a big like and a thumbs up, eh?
We really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much. And for everybody else, have a great week. Hope to see you at an online event or in person soon.